thank you for the invitation to chat with you. Can't hear me? Can you hear me now? All right. We're going to talk a little bit about the Vietnam War, particularly as a pilot and also as a prisoner of war for 6 years, 11 months, close to 7 years. I just rounded off that point. I joined the Navy in 1961. I'd already been approved to join the Air Force for pilot training. But at that point in time, unbeknownst to me, they were getting rid of pilots instead of bringing them in. So they kept putting it off my class convening date, so I decided I'd give the Navy a try. Joined the Navy, and I was a jet engine mechanic down in Key West, Boca Chica, in 1961. It was kind of a laid-back place. We only had about 4 squadrons on the base. About 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the chief would always come into our maintenance engine shop and say, "Okay, guys, 2 o'clock, let's knock it off and go fishing." Which was fine with me. But the base had a big boat, so we'd go out and go after langosta or go fishing or whatever it might be. Anyway, I was there during the Cuban Missile Crises, and little Boca Chica turned it from a Sleepy Hollow into the biggest and fastest and busiest airport in the United States military. Everybody and his brother showed up from somewhere, Air Force, Marines, Army, etc. Finally, I passed all the physicals and everything, and I left Key West, and I started flight training for the Navy in the end of 1962. I received my wings as a Navy pilot and also my commission in August of 1964. And from there that was in Texas, Kingsville. I went through Pensacola, Meridian, Mississippi, Kingsville, Texas, and then on to Oceana, Virginia, where I joined my first squadron, VA 76, in early 1965. We got a lot of training at that point in time. You can't imagine what the price of fuel was. 13 cents a gallon. Average pilot got at least 30 hours a month. That was minimum. And if you wanted more, you could get as many as 60 hours a month of flying, which was usually fly twice a day, every day of the month. So you build up a lot of time. I was on the aircraft carrier America. We went to the Caribbean, did 3 months of workups. That's where they test the ships and the air wing and all that good stuff to fly till everything breaks. Yeah, I was on the America for that, came back, and immediately we got turned around, and I was put on the Enterprise and did the same thing for 3 months, and we finally left Norfolk, Virginia in October 1965, sailed nonstop around South Africa, south to Southeast Asia. If you recall, the Enterprise was the first nuclear carrier, and we had a totally nuclear fleet with us. We were supposed to stop in South Africa. They decided they didn't like our nukes, so that we went on to Southeast Asia. Arrived in the South China Sea in early November 1965. At that time in the war, I only knew at that point that the good guys were supposedly in the south and the bad guys were in the north, and that was about it. We didn't know a whole lot about what things were happening. I thought the war would probably only last about 6 months. We had such superior air power and all kinds of power. Well, I only was off about 10 years, so, you know. But anyway, we would have one carrier sitting off the coast of South Vietnam, and that carrier for 2 weeks, or about 2 weeks, they would do primarily day bombing in South Vietnam, rockets, napalm, guns, etc., and that was in support of the Marines and the Army guys that were on the ground. Now, if there's such a thing as what you could call a satisfactory or mission, I would say that doing that, we saved a lot of lives of guys that are still around today, or at least came back from Vietnam through our ability to hold down the Vietnamese and save the lives of our guys. So we would normally be at sea for 30 days, the carrier. We'd spend 2 weeks in the south and we'd go north for 2 weeks. Later on, we just stayed in the north, but we would spend 30 days at sea, and out of that, we would have 2 weeks of night flying only, and we would primarily fly over Laos and the eastern or western part of North Vietnam and try to interdict the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Flying at night in enemy country with no lights, etc., is an exciting option. And even more exciting is coming back and landing on the carrier at night. Now, there's some stories I could tell you about doing that, but I'm not going to go into that at this point in time. I'm going to jump forward a little bit to December of 1965. I was on the Enterprise, as I mentioned. We were off the coast of North Vietnam, and unfortunately, we were losing about 1 every 6 guys. It's kind of like playing Russian roulette. Two guys that I know or were in my squadron were killed. I was not shot down at that point in time, but we were losing out of 16 pilots in an A4 squadron. It's a single-seat airplane, 1 pilot, and 1 engine. And we were losing about 1 every 6 guys to combat. Now today, what you see, the younger crowd at least, I know a few Vietnam vets around here that know what I'm talking about, but in those days we didn't have all the fancy weapons we have today. We didn't have lasers and missiles and all the rest of the stuff. If you wanted to drop a bomb on somebody or shoot them up or whatever it may be, you got right down there close and personal with them. We often flew in at 300 feet, or very rarely did we ever roll on a target above 8,000 feet, and you're in a 45-degree dive. You pull out at 3,000 feet, so you're right there, eyeball to eyeball. There were a few times when I accidentally flew over anti-aircraft guns at 100 feet, and I could look out there and see them eyeball to eyeball. I could see their facial recognition, their facial features. Of course, they shot at me, which made it very interesting also, but I managed to get away from that. Anyway, to go back to December 65, in the north, all of our targets were primarily hard targets. That is, they were bridges, or they were ammunition dumps, or they were something of that nature, unlike the south where we were doing close air support. As I mentioned, we didn't have the fancy weapons that we have today. And get me right, I don't begrudge the guys today. They go in at 20,000 feet, 30,000 feet. They got laser weapons. They designate the target, shoot their missile, and off they go. So you don't have very many shoot downs. To jump ahead a little bit, before the Vietnam War was over, we had 550 POWs in North Vietnam and Hanoi. We had about, I won't say an equal number, I don't know exactly the number right off the top of my head, of guys that were killed. And we had about 100 guys, prisoners of war in the south. So you're looking at around 650, 660, somewhere in that neighborhood. Anyway, what we would do if we had a really big target, such as this particular target I'm talking about, which was called the Quang Bi Power Plant, which was an electrical power plant to the northeast of the port city of Haiphong, which provided a lot of electrical power for North Vietnam. What we had was what we called an alpha strike. And that is, we would try to put as many airplanes, as much bombs as we possibly could on the target. And oftentimes that required, we had 2 carriers, which provided 80 airplanes, strike airplanes, plus you had tankers and other aircraft that would be involved as well. Anyway, this was an alpha strike into North Vietnam. And from where we were at, normally the carrier would be 100 miles, 150 miles at sea, and we would launch off. We'd get the whole our air wing, which was about 40 airplanes for these strikes, and about 40 from the other carrier, and off we go. This strike was planned. Half the strike aircraft, or 40 of the strike aircraft, would go in at low level, and at 300 feet. We were dropping what this weapon is called Snake Eye, which the bomb drops off, and there's fins on the back, pops open like this, and the bomb drops straight down. The other half were doing dive bombing, and we were alternating how we were going to hit the target. I was in a flight of 4 aircraft. I was a number 4 guy, as always. I was a junior officer. We used to refer to ourselves as flak bait. By the time we got to the target, they were already zeroed in on us, so they knew who number 4 was. He got most of the fire. Anyway, we were flying in. My squadron commander was leading our division. Now, in the Navy, most of our flights are what we call division, which is 4 airplanes. You have your flight leader and his wingman on the right side usually. You have a second 2 aircraft, and it's called a section. So then we have a section leader and then the number 4 guy flying his wing. So this is the way we're going in there to this target. And we were going in at low altitude, 300 feet. And it was a big power plant, 80 airplanes on this strike. And I'm telling you this just to give you an idea of what a mission is. Now this was a little more exciting, or turned out to be a little more exciting than what I had planned on, but I'll tell you the story. Have you all seen the Tom Cruise movie, Top Gun, whatever the last one was? You remember in the beginning they're running down this valley, the bottom of the valley, as fast as they can go? That was how we were going to approach this target. Flew directly north, hit the coastline, directly west, down in the valley, pop up over a mountain ridge and roll in on the target, which was right there. It's 10 miles south of the ridge. So we go up there, I'm flying number 4. I'm more worried about getting scraped off on the side of a mountain than I am anything else. And to go back to the movie, we were doing exactly what Tom Cruise and his guys were doing, except we didn't have any music and we didn't have any girls, so it wasn't quite as much fun. Anyway, long story short, we're about 5-8 minutes from doing our pull-up, and then rolling in over the mountain. When we go over a mountain, you roll over the top inverted, upside down, so you can see the peak of the mountain. And then you pull down the other side. So you're upside down when you go over the mountain, like this. Then you roll out, obviously. Anyway, I had taken a hit in the airplane somewhere, and it hit my utility hydraulic system, and the light came on. Well, a utility hydraulic system is just like it says, utility. You don't need it normally, but if you have an emergency, you might. Well, I'm 3/4 of the way, 4/5 of the way to the target. I'm not going to turn around now by myself over enemy territory, so we just press on to the target. As we are approaching the target, we got the flight leader, his number 2, the section leader, and me. So the flight leader starts his pull-up over the mountain like this, and we're all following the same path. Well, as we get to about this position, my leader, my section leader, his nose drops below my airplane. So I'm rolling upside down, and as I'm watching him with one eyeball and watching the mountain with the other eyeball, he has taken a hit somehow. He goes straight down and straight into a mountain and blows up. He's full of fuel, he's full of bombs, and the rest of it. I was watching to see if the canopy came off of his airplane, whether he ejected or not, and it did not. He just went right straight into the mountain. I knew the guy really well. Jack Prudhomme was his name. Jack had a couple of young kids and a nice wife, and it was one of those moments that you have in your life that you never forget. Here I am hanging upside down watching a friend of mine die, getting mountain. Well, now is not the time to think about it. You've got other things on your mind besides that. You'll never forget it, but you don't want to think about it right now. So anyway, we go over the mountain. Now we're down. 1 and 2 are over here, and I'm 3 by myself. 4, number 3 is actually no longer around. I had a target, which was the base of a smokestack, probably 100, 150 feet high. By this time, 40 airplanes have already been to their target. It's on fire. There's smoke and flames going everywhere. You can hardly see the target. As you remember, I was down at 300 feet. I load, arm my weapons. And as we're approaching the target, I pickle off my 6 500-pound bombs. And just as I do, I get hit in the left wing of the airplane, and it rolls the airplane almost inverted. I roll back out and get hit in the other side, and it rolls again. And then all of a sudden, the nose disappears, just like somebody took a axe and cut the nose off of the airplane about 6, 8 inches in front of my windscreen. Anyway, I just pour right straight on ahead. There's nothing I could do, you know. I dropped down. We were in an estuary on the running out over the water at about 50 feet, and they're shooting down at me from both sides of this estuary. I finally get to the other end of the estuary, and I pull up to about 20,000 feet, and the carrier is about 150 miles south of me. And what are my options? The airplane quits flying, I jump out. I pull the ejection seat handle, and I get out, and I'm in the middle of the South China Sea. And I certainly don't want to go back over here where the bad guys are. So I just head on back to my carrier. And about that time, an F-4 Phantom came down and joined on my right wing, Navy guy. And what you normally would do is you sit on the right wing, you look at the airplane, you go underneath, inspect the airplane, you go to the other side, inspect the airplane, then you come back up over here to the right side, which he did. And I can remember just as clear as today, he didn't say a word, he just shook his head. And I'm thinking, well, thanks a lot, you know. I'm heading home. Fortunately, I got about 50 miles out from the carrier, called the call sign for Enterprise at that time was Climax, gave my sign, call Sunglass 502 or whatever I was at that time, 50 miles straight out, heavy battle damage, need a ready deck, inbound. They called back and said, you'll have a ready deck, keep it coming. Long story short, I made a nice landing on the carrier. As I'm taxiing forward with no nose and fuel running out of both wings and whatever else is happening under there, I'm looking at the guys on the flight deck, and they're all just standing there. Anyway, long story. But I parked the airplane, got out of the airplane, and the airplane was so shot up, both wings had a chunk of metal about 5 pounds, came right up through the belly of the airplane, through the gun bays. We had 50 caliber machine guns, and stopped about 6 inches short of the engine. Or I'd have been a guest to the Vietnamese or dead a lot earlier than that. Anyway, the airplane was so bad, they took the engine out, they took the electronics, all the secret stuff that was in the airplane, the guns, and just rolled the airplane over the side of the ship. It was beyond repair. Okay, that gives you an idea. Now that was a little more exciting than my average flight, okay, but that's, I won't say typical, but I had a few like that. On my shoot down, it was my 77th mission over in Vietnam. And it was a target that we were going after, a SAM site in North Vietnam. And the weather had settled in on the SAM site. SAM site is surface-to-air missile site. They shoot a missile at you, try to knock you down. They still do that today, by the way. But the weather was weathered out, so we went after a bridge in the southern part of North Vietnam, near the city of Vinh. speaking normally, that would be kind of a low risk target. I rolled in at 8,000 feet and was going to drop 6 500-pounders on this bridge. As soon as I put my nose down, the tail of the airplane got blown off. I had no control of the elevator at all, and the airplane was now about 70 degrees nose down, that's 90, so it's about like this. And it's starting to spin to the left. And I think it was on fire. I don't know for sure. Anyway, I had tried to use trim to get the nose up because we're only 5 miles inland. And I'm thinking if I get this thing out to water, at least I can eject in the water and maybe I get picked up, you know. Not to be. The last thing I remember, I looked at the airspeed indicator. It was 600 miles an hour or close to it. And I had my hand up on the bomb jettison handle to try to get rid of some of that weight so maybe I could get the nose up. And I remember thinking to myself, because now when you get real close to something, all of a sudden it explodes in your face. And I'm thinking, and I say to myself, never said it aloud, it's too late to get out. I remember taking my hand off of the bomb jettison and reaching for the ejection seat handle, which is between your legs and an A4, there's behind you is snow, and ejecting. I went out, took my helmet off, mask, everything. I don't remember, knocked me cold. It's like hitting a brick wall at 60 miles an hour with your head when you hit the air at that speed. I don't remember anything. I remember feeling a jerk, and the next thing I know, I was 10 feet underwater in the middle of a river. And I'm looking up, and the lights filtering down through the water. I automatically inflated my flotation gear, May West, if you want to call it that, got to the top. It's 7 o'clock in the morning. And the only sounds I hear are dogs barking on both. This river is about a mile wide. Dogs barking on both sides of the river. If you've ever been to Vietnam, it has a certain smell. You'll know if you've been there what I'm talking about. You could smell it. All the cooking is done on charcoal fires, by the way. They don't have anything other than that. And here I am, in the middle of this river. As I said, my helmet was gone. My pistol had come loose and come up and sliced my throat a little bit. It was bleeding, but nothing too serious. I got rid of my parachute, and I'm in the middle of this river. They put out a boat from the south side, one from the north side. The one from the south side got there first. By this time, I got my hands in the air. I'd gotten rid of my pistol. I wasn't going to shoot my way out of North Vietnam with a pistol. So, and my survival radio, I had taken it out so we could communicate with the people in the air. It was busted, threw it away. So I got rid of everything I could get rid of. They stopped about from here to that wall, and I looked at them, and they looked at me, and I put my hands up. And I'm sure I was in shock, because I didn't feel any real fear. I guess I didn't feel much of anything other than what's going to happen next. They stopped, they looked at me, I looked at them. There was a guy standing up in the front of the boat, and I was thinking to myself, this guy's already been in the war because his face was all scarred up from grenades or whatever it might be. Anyway, they stopped, 6 guys in black pajamas, all with AK-47s. They finally came over, grabbed me by the back of the neck, pulled me ashore, and the fun and games began. That was the 26th of March, 1966. You never travel in Vietnam or North Vietnam in those days during the daytime because of the bombings, etc. Everything moved at night. They took my boots, so I was barefoot. I had torn up my knees and my neck during the ejection. Wherever my head was, it didn't hurt, but I'd have to go like this to move it. They wired my arms behind my back, of course. They marched me at night or threw me in the back of a truck or in the bottom of a boat or whatever it may be for the next week. Each day they would march me through these villages, and the villagers had the right to throw stones, rocks, whatever they wanted, or take clubs and beat on you. And I had 2 or 3 times false executions where they'd come up and put a gun to your head. You never knew whether they were going to pull the trigger. And I'll tell you honestly, after about a week, I didn't really care whether they did or they didn't. I had a couple of instances where the Vietnamese would bind me up against a wall, 6 guys or whatever, with their AK-47s, and attempt a mock execution. Anyway, 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm laying in the back of an open truck, and it's raining, and I got my arms wired behind my back. It's a week later. It's April Fool's Day, and this truck stops in front of this old doors, double doors, big old black wrought iron hinges on it, etc. And it says across the top, Centrale Maison, or Maison Centrale, which in French means this is the main house or the prison. I've got to back up here one time. The 4th day after I was shot down, I was in a little village, so excuse me, I'm going to back up a little bit because this is somewhat important. Anyway, they take me outside out of this hooch I was in, and I'm sitting out there, and this gentleman, older gentleman, comes by. He speaks French. I spoke some French, and he starts interrogating me in French, and I keep telling him, name, rank, serial number, date of birth, all the same stuff you're supposed to tell him, but nothing else. And he doesn't get upset, but the little guard I got with me, in his AK-47, he is getting really upset. So about halfway through this thing, 3/4 the way through, he runs off into the jungle, comes back with a club, which is about 6 feet long and a couple inches in diameter, and he's going to beat it out of me one way or the other. The old man tells him, no, don't do that. I could understand that in French. Don't do that. During the daytime, they would keep me in this dugout in the ground. It was about maybe 6 feet long, a couple of feet wide, down about 4 or 5 feet deep, just a dirt floor at the bottom, and had coconut logs over the top, just a shelter, bomb shelter, really. And they would throw me down in there during the day. So anyway, the old man leaves, and I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to get it now. So I'm standing at the top of this pit, if you will, and this guard comes up from behind me and pushes me. Of course, I've got my arms right up my back, and so I just threw a header right down at the bottom of this pit. And I hear that AK-47 snap back, and I think, this is it. He screamed and he yelled and he stomped off, but he didn't kill me, obviously, or I wouldn't be here. The reason I tell you this was the 4th day of my captivity. And I'm thinking, World War II lasted 4 years. I've lasted 4 days. I can last another 4 days. And then it was 4 weeks, 4 months, a year, on and on. I always set a goal. That was my first goal I set. Can last another 4 days. But I always set one. And the entire time I was there, almost 7 years, I always set a goal. Now they all came and went, except one, but I always set a goal. Something to shoot for, something to look forward to. I arrived in North Vietnam, and for the next week, I was interrogated and tortured. They had some real tricks with their ropes, etc. If you lay and sit on the floor with your arms behind you, with your legs straight out, tie your shoulder or tie your wrist together, and then try to bring your arms up and put them in your lap. The body does not work that way. So dislocated shoulders, painful. Anyway, they threw me out of there after a week. Had, during that period of time, a few sips of water, and I think a couple rotten bananas, and that was about it. They threw me into what we called Heartbreak Hotel. Now, Heartbreak Hotel was an old part of Central, Maison Central. It was the old French prison. It was built back in the 1800s. It looked it. The paint was peeling off the walls, old rusty doors, etc., and they threw me in one of these by myself. And on one side of it, it was about maybe 6 feet wide, about 6 feet long, on concrete slab, and on one end had leg irons, the other end had hand manacles. Anyway, so I'm in there, and I'm thinking, well, you know, I've survived this long. Anyway, I've been in there a few hours, and it's quiet. All of a sudden, I hear this American voice down the hall. You American? Yeah, Navy. He introduced himself. He said, look at the wall by the door, carved in the wall. You'll see something. Memorize it. And what it was the tap code. I don't know if you've ever heard of that or not, but it's the alphabet aligned. There's 5 letters across, 5 rows, and you can, if you know what all that is, you can communicate through a concrete wall 2 or 3 feet thick. And that became our main mode of communication. The Vietnamese didn't want us to communicate. They were totally afraid of communication because that means organization, that means resistance, et cetera, et cetera. So, if I can remember, hi. 3 letters, or third letter, 4th letter, 2nd row. Okay? And I could communicate through a wall faster then than I could use a typewriter. And I know there's still a few people in here that know what a typewriter is. Anyway, that was one. We developed many more as time went by. From there, I eventually was moved to a camp called the Zoo. I want you to take just 1 minute and see if you can put yourself in this picture. You're on the other side of the world. You have no friends. You have no wife, girlfriend, car, wallet, money, clothes. You have nothing. 0, zip. If you're injured, you're going to stay injured unless you heal up. You have no newspaper to read, no TV, no books, no nothing, no paper. All you have is you. You're wearing rags, you're hungry, and you don't know what's going to happen 5 minutes from now. All you have is you and your brain to keep you alive, to help you survive. You learn to eat anything you can get in your mouth that you don't throw back up again. You eat bugs. I've eaten bugs, rats, mice, you name it. I've eaten it at some point in time. So you have nothing to look forward to each day. And you're locked up, usually in solitary confinement, at least for the first 6 months. After that, as more and more people were shot down, I eventually found out I was around number 60 that got shot down. When I was shot down, I didn't know if there was another American alive in North Vietnam, because nobody told us. Anyway, each day, you have to make the decision, consciously or subconsciously, that you're going to live. You only have 2 choices. You're either going to live or you're going to die. Now, some people made the wrong decision, or at least they made the decision they were going to die, and they did. You learn to get tough. You learn to be like rawhide. You learn about everything you ever did, wanted to do, thought about, everything you learned in school, on and on and on, just to keep this up here moving, keep it going. You also learn this is how you are going to live. This is how you are going to survive. So, that's part 1 of it, self-survival. You have to be alive. Second part of it is, as time goes by, more and more people are shot down, more and more people are put together. You have tried to survive. you've gotten tough. The second thing you need to do, or want to do, hopefully, is to keep your fellow prisoners alive. It takes compassion. You have to share everything. I mean, if you're getting a cup of rice, unless you give half of that cup of rice to your buddy. We've had guys that have, climbed out of their cells up through the things or whatever it may be to drop a half a loaf of rotten bread to their buddies just to keep them alive. You have to communicate, because what is communication? Communication keeps us together. If we don't communicate, we can't resist, we can't do anything. I can't help you if we would communicate every day through the concrete walls, all the different other modes of communication we had. I was one of those people that was an expert in the communications, and I used to do all the communications in larger cells. As time went by, we had as many as 40, 60 people in a cell block. But never openly were we allowed to communicate. You had to give aid, physical aid, to your fellow prisoners. I was in a cell with 3 other guys one time. Myself, Charlie Baldock, who was my roomie long time, a guy by the name of Cherry, and another gentleman who I'm not going to give you his name. Anyway, I don't know how he ever got there, because you're never supposed to be in the military, but he had asthma. And he would have these asthma attacks, and the other 3 of us would have to stay up all night and give him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation just to keep him alive. We had guys that had serious injuries from ejections or wounds, etc. Sciatic nerve damage, that we'd have to stay up and help them as best we could to deal with it, to massage their legs or back or whatever it might be to just try to help them. So that was number 2. Now I'm going to jump ahead a little bit, but it's the same subject. This is year about 5, maybe 6. Things have changed a little bit. Ho Chi Minh has died. Treatment has improved somewhat. Food is still garbage. But anyway, I was in a cell with about 30 other guys in Hanoi, in a camp. They were saying the Hanoi Hilton, but the real name of the camp is Hoa Lo, for your information. Not that you care, but Hoa Lo. The cell door slammed open one night. They threw 2 guys in. One guy's about 6'2", 6'3", and luckily he didn't probably weigh more than 100 pounds. The other guy is a smaller guy, but both of them looked like they were starved to death. And the reason that the Vietnamese threw them in with us was, I guess they wanted to see if we'd keep them alive. These guys had decided to quit eating. They had given up. They wouldn't eat. Well, I mean, you got a half a dozen or a couple of dozen young naval guys that we're not going to let it happen on our watch. It's not going to happen here. We would throw those guys down on the ground. We'd take whatever food we have, would stuff it in their mouth, and if they threw it up, which they did, we'd gather it up and put it right back in again. After 3 or 4 treatments, they decided they were going to live, because they knew what was going to happen if they didn't eat. I can't say for sure, but those two guys were still walking around today, to the best of my knowledge. The other part of being a prisoner, and I think I'm running out of time here. The other part of being a prisoner is to resist the enemy. And we did in every way we possibly could resist the enemy. Make life as tough as you can for them. We would, in interrogations, we had a rule. Obviously, besides the code of conduct, we have what we call the plums. We made them understand that if you want anything from me, you're only going to get it one way, and that's to torture me. There ain't going to be any other easy way to get it. And as time changed, they kind of got away from that a little bit. The first couple of years I was there, they said they were going to execute us, and I think they were thinking they were. But after a couple of years of all of the clamor around the world, and particularly from the United States about the treatment of prisoners of war, et cetera, they kind of got away from that. But if they wanted something, we said, well, I'm going to give you anything unless you torture me. So they knew what the game was. I'm going to tell you a real quick story here, and then I'm going to skip on to 1969. I'm in a camp called the Zoo Annex with 6 other guys in a cell. There's other cell blocks are on both sides of us, 3. Anyway, 2 guys in a cell block that was that away, and each cell was surrounded by a brick wall, okay, so you couldn't see over it. They decided they were going to escape. So we saved up what food we could, what extra clothing we could, and threw it across the wall to them to aid in their escape. And so it was a Saturday night and it was raining, which was ideal for escape. We knocked out the light outside of our cell door. Anyway, these guys went over the wall. Well, they were both captured. One was tortured to death, the other one survived. But we had a lockdown in the prison from there on for the next 3 months. We were not outside of that cell for 3 months. And I mean, it's 120 degrees in that cell block because the walls are 2 feet thick and they're concrete, etc. It was not uncommon to not be able to sleep at all until about 2 o'clock in the morning because it was so hot and you're sweating, and you maybe fall asleep about 2 o'clock in the morning and you're up at 4 or 5 in the morning. Kind of nasty, but covered with sweat. You're dirty. Maybe you had a shave in a bath, or a bath, I would call it, dumped a bucket of water over you a couple of weeks ago, and you might have 20, 30 boils on your body. And if you've ever had a boil, they aren't comfortable. But anyway, here we were, and finally, after about a month and a half of this, one day, the cell door slams open, and the Vietnamese guard comes in, and he said, "Me," which was my Vietnamese name. Why, I don't know. It didn't matter. "Me, you are allowed to take a bath." I said, "Okay, fantastic. What about the rest of my guys?" "No, only you are allowed to take a bath." Now, what are they trying to do? They're trying to divide us up, turn us against each other, all the rest of it. I said, "No, I can't do that. They either we all get it or nobody." So he disappears, slams the door, closed, disappears. He's back in 5, 10 minutes. Opens the door, "Me," and gave me this signal. That means put on your long sleeve shirt, your dress coat, if you will, and pants. So they marched me up to what we call the head shed, the headquarters, and I walk in, and the camp commander's sitting at his desk, and there's about the whole place is lined with Vietnamese officers and sergeants or whatever it is. So he marched me over in front of the camp commander, and he said, "You refuse to take a bath. You refused my order." And I said, "No, I'd love to take a bath, but all the rest of the guys in my cell need a bath too." "No, they can't have a bath, and you have refused." And I said, "Yeah, I did." He said, "Okay, drop your pants and lay down on the floor," which I did. Didn't have much choice. So anyway, I got 30 lashes with a rubber hose across my buttocks and my lower back, etc. So finally he gets up, and not being too smart at that time, I was so kind of full of excuse me for saying, piss and vinegar. I pulled my pants up and I said, well, now that I have my bathing, how can I have my bath? Get out of here. So they throw me out, and I'm marching back, I'm walking back to my cell, and I got this Vietnamese guard with a bayonet sticking right in the middle of my back, and I'm laughing. And he thinks, this guy's gone off the, he's gone. This was my 30th birthday. And being of German descent, it was a German tradition that your dad would give you a little spanking on your butt on your birthday. He didn't think it was funny. But anyway, as I said, you have to live, you have to take care of yourself, you have to survive. You have to help others to survive. You have to have that compassion. Take care of them and resist the enemy in every way you possibly can. Toward the end, we had one of our Vietnamese guards come to the door. Now, this was February '73. And he says in sign language, Lee Duc-To, who was their foreign minister, Kissinger, who was ours, a few of you remember his name, Paris. So he's giving us a signal. So we always had people that were listening and keeping track of all this stuff. We had every name, 550 guys, memorized. Everybody had a little bit, a thing they do. As I said, I was a communicator. I would tap through the wall and all that kind of stuff. But we had a memory bank, 6 guys, and they would remember everything that was passed one way or the other. So we had memory banks to do that. We also had memory banks of who was in what prison, what cell, whatever, on and on. Anyway, they finally pulled us out of our cells, lined us up out in the courtyard, and they were required by the agreement to read the statement that we were going to be released. Now, we had already surmised this some way, and we communicated it all the way from our head shed to our senior guys, our senior ranking officers, SROs. So we had our instructions, our orders were you will go out, you will stand in formation. You will not clap, you will not shout, you will not do any of this. And of course, they had the cameras out there and the whole thing. We kind of ruined their parade that way. But I want to cover this. Now, I have fortunately been in some of the finest squadrons in the Navy, won all kinds of awards for this, that, and whatever it may be. Really top-notch organizations and top-notch people. But of the 560 guys in North Vietnam, we had Air Force, which was the majority of it. We had about 150 Navy guys, all pilots, our air crew. We had a scattering of Marines, and we even had some CIA guys that were there. We were in rags. We looked like a hobo that you would find down in the bad part of town. Unshaven, needing haircuts, needing a shower, and all the rest. But to my knowledge, I've never seen a better, or never been part of a better group. They were proud to be Americans. They were defiant, patriotic, and military to the end. Great people. I was finally released on the 12th of February 1973. The door slammed open one night. We walked in with boxes about midnight with boxes of clothes, shoes, you name it. And we didn't get any sleep that night. Next morning, marched out of the prison camp. First time with no blindfolds, no handcuffs, wire behind your back or whatever. Got on a bus, and they took us to an airport which is east of Hanoi called Gia Lam, which is their joint military joint civilian airfield. I don't know if it's still there or not. They parked us on one side of the airfield. We got Vietnamese beer, warm, and cigarettes. And we're just sitting there, and all of a sudden, I'm looking out through the front of this bus, the windows. Here comes a big Air Force, shiny silver Air Force C-141 comes in and lands. Big American flag on the tail. First one I'd seen in 7 years. They moved us around to the other side. Eventually, we got off, lined up in two guys at a time. And they had a long table with the Vietnamese on one side. They had to sign us off. The other table was Air Force guys. They had to sign it for us. And I get to the end of it, and this burly Air Force sergeant takes me by the shoulder. And we're walking out to one of the 141s, and he said, "We better get out of here before they change their mind." And I'm saying, "You'll be running to keep up with me, buddy." Anyway, I was on that first flight out of Vietnam. First guy back into the state of Florida, Jacksonville, Florida. I returned to the Navy duty. I spent a week getting debriefed up in Jacksonville and every medical test known to mankind. Stayed in the Navy for another 12 years, flew off aircraft carriers again, flew A4s as a combat pilot, and I flew a Pacific Missile Test Center in California with the Tomahawk cruise missiles and all the things that we developed out there. One thing I have to say is, considering where I came from and what I lived through, I never have a bad day. Things can be pretty rough, but they're never anywhere a thousandth of what that was. And a good friend of mine, in fact, somebody mentioned his name here earlier, his saying, which I adapted, which I stole from him, was, "I never have a bad day if there's a doorknob on the inside." I'm going to, running over.
That's fine. Can we do about 10 takes again?
As long as they want. Thank you. Thank you all.
We'll do about 10 minutes of Q&A. And if you need to go. If you want to stay for Q&A, about 10 minutes and get
Appreciate it. Okay, anybody got a question? Yes, sir.
Jim Fitch, when you were there, there was a television interview here conducted trying to convince the prisoners to testify to the public that they were being treated well. There's a story, a TV story,
Excuse me.
where those who were being interviewed signaled with Morse code using their eyes towards
Yeah.
Where were you at that time? Were you part of that?
I was not part of that. I think I was in a camp called the Briar Patch. So I was 30 miles out of Hanoi at that time, but I do know about it and the guys that were
Did that
involved.
have any impact on your treatment afterwards and spread to your location as well?
Well, it's hard to say. It was so bad. Whether it got any worse or not, I'm not sure. When I was in Briar Patch, I mean, the guards at that time, every time the door opened, you never knew what was going to happen. They were allowed to beat the crap out of you, excuse my French, anytime they wanted to. And I remember I'd been in Briar Patch about 6 months. There was no electricity, no running water. I hadn't had a bath or even dumped a bucket of water on my head in months, and lost a lot of weight. I got shot down. I weighed 175 pounds, maybe good muscle. I probably was down to 115, 120 pounds in 6 months. I walked out of this cell one morning, and we had this little vat of concrete with water in it, and you dunk your steel plate in there, whatever garbage you had to eat. And I looked in there, and I scared myself. I looked like I had just walked out of Dachau, one of the Nazi concentration camps. It just, but anyway, the treatment was bad enough. Whatever happened, we did have one of our favorites was Jane Fonda, that she did some stuff over there. Yeah. I don't know if I dare do this, but we used to, when I was at Briar Patch, or at the zoo, I finally, after about 4 months, they threw another guy in the cell with me, Charlie Baldock. We were both off the same ship, different squadrons, etc. Well, we were both young and feeling our oats as best you can in a prison camp, and we gave them a hard time. And what they wanted to do was every time they came to the door, when they left, they wanted us to bow. And we wouldn't do it. Well, after getting your head beat in enough times, we finally decided we'll nod our head. And we gave them the peace sign. Well, that was a lot of fun until it wasn't fun. Because Jane Fonda told them what it really meant. And she did some other stuff that was bad. All right, questions? Yes, sir.
From a previous talk, can you talk about how you kept your mind sharp regarding a house and like?
Yes, as I mentioned, the only thing keeping you alive or keeping you going was your brain. I thought about everything I had ever done, what I'd studied in college or what I'd done in high school. I was a carpenter. I designed a house in my brain as far as right down to the last 2x4, etc. I tried to remember everything I'd ever done, thought about. I had composed poetry in my head, written books in my head, all these other type of things just to do that. Now, later on when we had other people that had other knowledge, and you'd be amazed, you put 50 people in the same room and everybody's got some talent, some knowledge. I learned to speak French and I learned to speak Spanish and a smattering of Russian and a little German and even a little Russian. But you keep your mind going. I don't care how bad a shape your body is. If your mind goes with it, you're done. We had 6 guys that I know of in North Vietnam that didn't come back with us. And the reason they didn't come back was they were crazy. And the Vietnamese were not going to release crazy people. They didn't want the bad press. Now, those guys were seen there alive. They never came back. So, what can I say? Stay sharp if you can, because that's how you're going to survive. Your body, used to have a saying about, I thought when I was at Briar Patch, chances of survival were about 50-50, considering the treatment, the food, torture, whatever. And there was a saying that, if I can get this correct now, if you lose your money, you've lost nothing. If you lose, I'll jump to the last part. If you lose your spirit, you've lost all. So, another question. So that's what we had to do to keep going, keep our mind going. Yes, sir.
I felt very fortunate because I too was in Vietnam. And of course, I went over there in '63, right after Kennedy was assassinated and Johnson took over.
Yeah.
And I was on a destroyer. So we were up and down South Vietnam quite a bit. And I served on landing party carrying the AR and stuff like that. But it's interesting how God got me through it. And I remember praying to God, and I said, God, you get me through this, and I'm going to Ramos. And believe it or not, that took place. And I got out in November of '64 while I was in Vietnam. And I did go to Bible school, and that's where my wife and I met.
Well, fantastic. Well, there's an old saying, and I'm sure you've all heard it, at least those in the military, there are no atheists in a foxhole, okay? I have prayed many, many times for other people who were being tortured or wherever it may be. I never actually prayed for myself, but I used to pray a lot for other people.
So I mentioned that there's a lot of anger and that sense of you like to exact revenge at certain points during that. How'd you get through that? Where are
Well,
you today?
I mentioned it earlier to someone, but after I'd been there about 5 years or so, I had a brutal hatred for these people. I had the thought that if I could take out 2 of them, I'd be willing to sacrifice my own life to do so. But the opportunity never came, thank God. But, you know, hate's a tremendous motivator. And I won't say it didn't keep a lot of people alive, it probably did. But about that same period of time, maybe half a year later or whatever it was, you know, one thing you got is plenty of time to think. I realized I didn't want to go home, and I always thought I'd get out of there. I would go home at some point in time. I wanted to go home the same guy, if I could remember who that was, that got there. I didn't want to be carrying that anger, that hatred, all the rest of that stuff with me. And I kind of adopted that mentality that when I leave here, I'm going to leave all this garbage behind me. So, yeah, it's part of my life. It was a big part of my life. But I'm changing the chapter on that one. I'm closing that chapter, and I got a lot of things to do from there on. So that was good for me. Yes, sir.
Yeah, you said that, you used your brain to stay sharp and to occupy your time when you were there. You said a while ago that when you lose your spirit, you lose it all.
Yeah.
How did you get your spirit up when you were, as a prisoner?
I guess part of it was I just would not allow myself to think that this was the end of the road, the end of the line. I always had I would say an optimistic look, but a positive look on I was going to survive this and how I was going to survive it. I mean, we had people that just gave up, as I mentioned. It just, you know, they've reached a certain point. Everybody's got a different point. Now, I will say one thing that I sometimes say. Now, you, like me, never know how strong you are. But there, hopefully, will never come a time you have to find out. But if you're faced with, like an object, you are faced with a situation you don't know whether you can survive it or not, if you're strong enough, and most people are a lot stronger than they think they are. They're a lot stronger than they think they are. You will survive it. You might get a few scrapes on the way, but you'll survive it.
Yeah, Susie?
You talked about being the communications part of it. I was just wondering, how did you keep track of the days or the months and the years? I mean, did you have a way of...
We had our memory bank.
Well, then a follow-up question, did you ever have the desire to go back to Vietnam?
A lot of people have gone back to Vietnam, and they've been treated royally. I personally have not. When I was on that 141, flying out of Vietnam to Clark Air Force Base in the Philippines, I was sitting backwards on the airplane, and I saw the coastline of Vietnam disappear behind the wing, and the rest of it was water. And I said to myself, and I don't know whether I said it loud or I said it just subconsciously, I will never come back. I'd been that close to dying a lot of times. And I said, never again, never, I will never come back here. Now I obviously stayed I was a combat pilot from there on, and maybe I'm a slow learner, but
Did we know where you were, and were there ever any rescue attempts, and if not, why not?
well, I don't really know the 100% answer to that. We did have reconnaissance airplanes, probably a 69, 70 time frame, that flew over our camps, so they knew where the camps were. Now, there was an attempted rescue in Sante, which is a camp which was, trying to remember, maybe 60, 70 miles west of Hanoi. And they had an elaborate plan, the helos and the whole thing. They got there, and everybody was gone. That was the only one. it was treacherous to go into North Vietnam. I belong to a club, aviation club, that's called the River Rats. And just like here recently, we rescued a flight crew in Iran. If you got shot down north of the Red River, you're on your own. They had lost so many other airplanes and other crews going in there to try to rescue people that if you got shot down north of the Red River, that's it. They're not coming looking for you.
Let's get one more question, and then afterwards you can intercept them on the way
Yeah.
out.
Okay. Slade. No, they didn't. Well, we came back. I never considered myself a hero. I did my job. This little thing up here says, return with honor. That was our motto. That's what we live for. We're going to return to the United States with honor. We came back as heroes, whether we were or we weren't. But the average guy that came back to the States, dribbled back to the States, they were treated horribly in many instances. Okay?
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Sorry to run over.
No, no, they're happy to have you run over. Maybe not so much with me, but if you would like to talk with Brad, he'll be here. Hopefully that's okay. And again, this is going to be recorded, so we'll get it your way somehow, and you can share it too. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. I said thank you.
Yeah, thank you.